Reverend Gibson here? Not seeing Reverend Gibson. Wesley's going to do the pledge, and he's also going to do the invocation. So if you'll please stand and join Wesley.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity we have to come before you today and conduct the business in public. May we use your wisdom and your guidance in the decisions we make. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any additions or deletions to the agenda? I'd like to request to add an emergency item 5B discussing regarding the BCC, or Board of County Commissioners Office.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think you have to have a 5-0 vote for that.
Yes,
to
I
add
do.
an emergency item, and I would be opposed to this.
Okay. Before we continue, I would like to announce that immediately following this meeting, we'll have a special call meeting, unless there's 3 votes that say we can't, to address the issue in the BCC office.
Did you make a motion?
No, I can call a meeting without making a motion.
Well, I know, but I just asked if you made a motion.
No.
Well, how are you going to know if 3 are for it?
Well, if nobody speaks up, we'll have a special call meeting immediately following this meeting.
Mr. Attorney, do we have to have a vote on that?
Well, the rules for special meetings say that they may be held at the call of the chairman, or in his absence, the call of the vice chairman, or request a majority of the commission. The chairman has the ability to call this meeting. I think under the rules of debate, if he rules that we're going to have a meeting, it would require a majority of the commission to overrule that decision.
I would be opposed to it.
Anyone else opposed?
I believe that you're getting into litigation, and perhaps, and I think that that's an issue.
Well, we have government in the sunshine here, and I think the public needs to be aware of the business we conduct. So, hearing no other...
Just a minute, please. I'm not finished, if you don't mind. Are the rest of the commissioners aware of this? I'm not completely aware of it, so I don't know what the emergency, other than what this says, is.
Well, I can explain what I want. Did you want to say something?
No, I'm not totally up to speed of exactly what we're doing. I mean, I'm not opposed to another meeting immediately after this.
Well, just in a nutshell, Kim is considering resigning, and I would like to ask for a vote of confidence for Kim, and that's what I want the special call meeting for.
I think we're in the process of litigation, and I would like to, have a legal opinion here.
Well, apparently you know more about it than I do, because I'm not aware of any litigation. Bottom line is hearing no opposition other than Commissioner Bowden, we will immediately following this meeting have a special call meeting to address this issue. Next item on the agenda is proclamations and presentations. We have a proclamation honoring Tanim Goldsmith, and I hope I pronounced that correct, Tanim, on his retirement from Indian River County Solid Waste Disposal District effective January 19th, 2007. Whereas Tanim Goldsmith has announced his retirement as Assistant Management Director for the Solid Waste Disposal District effective January 19, 2007.
Congratulations.
And I'll give this just a second. I can't wait to get out of here.
You can't wait to get out of here, Gary. Read faster. Read faster.
And you've got to have your moment of honor here. Whereas Tanim Goldsmith was hired in March 12, 2001 as a Solid Waste Disposal District Environmental Engineer, in July 4th, 2003, Tanim's title was changed to Assistant Managing Director, which is the position he holds to present. And whereas Tanim Goldsmith has served this county and the public with distinction and selflessness, and during his years of service, he was dedicated and his work was greatly appreciated by all employees and co-workers alike. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the board applaud his efforts on behalf of the county, and the board wishes to express their appreciation for his dedication, service that he has given to Indian River County for the last 5 years. Be it further proclaimed that the Board of County Commissioners and staff extend heartfelt wishes for success in his future endeavors, adopted the 16th day of January 2007 by the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you. We also have wait. We also have a plaque for you to go with that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Speech.
Yes.
She got a picture with all of us.
On the consent agenda,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item 7N as in Nancy.
okay. Any other?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Amended.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Mr. O'Brien?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to pull this for a little discussion. This is the annual report for the Children's Services Advisory Committee. I just wanted to give I think a congratulations on a job well done. Gene Klein and Brad Bernauer have worked hard on this. This is an agency that receives funding from the county, and then they work with a lot of partner agencies to provide services to our children. They work with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, the Catholic Church, Exchange Club Castle, Gifford Youth, Hibiscus Children's Center, a lot of other different agencies. I think it's a big number here. 15,793 children were served throughout our community. I guess the good news is a lot of kids were served. The bad news is that we have to provide these services to the kids. So I did just want to bring this up to provide a little bit of recognition for the work that council is doing. And with that, I'd like to move that we accept their report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Under public items, public hearing, board to consideration to approve purchase of agricultural conservation easement on the Sexton Ranch under the County Environmental Lands Program. That's found on pages 116 to 218. Let me, if I could, make a statement. Throw this out for the commission, and the LAC committee had asked for an additional update on the appraisal. That will not be available until the 31st of January. And what I would like to do is open the public hearing and move this forward to a date certain. And I think February 20th would give time for us to get the appraisals back, to have the LAC committee evaluate those appraisals, probably need a special call meeting, and then bring this back on probably February 20th. But anyway, that's my thought on this. So I'll open the public hearing and go from there. And staff report first, I guess, if we want to go into this. Do we want to do, I don't know where the support is on the commission, if the commission would like to do this or not. If so, we don't need to go into the public hearing at this point because we'll be having it in February.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I think that I see some faces out there that both obviously pro and probably some cons. I think we owe it to them to go on ahead and at least give them the opportunity to express their opinions now, since we've advertised it in this fashion. And then if we need to, like you said, just postpone this to a date certain, or to continue, if you will, perhaps the public hearing at a date certain upon getting the appraisals would be an appropriate decision. But I don't think we need to send everybody home that may have an opinion on this today.
Okay. If that's the wish of the council, will staff, would you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Roland DuBois, Chief of Environmental Planning with the county. I do have a slideshow. Also, Sean Sexton, who's representing the Sexton family, also has requested and has a brief presentation just to show a little more about the property. This is the Sexton Ranch Agricultural Conservation Easement Project under the county's Environmental Land Acquisition Program. Just a refresher, the county's had an environmental land acquisition program since actually 1990. In 1992 was the first bond referendum that was passed. The second referendum, which applies here, was 2004 land acquisition bond referendum approved by voters. A little different than the 1992 bond, which was pretty much earmarked specifically just for environmentally significant lands. The 2004 bond was expanded to include not only environmentally significant lands targeted for acquisition, but also agricultural lands and cultural heritage or historic lands. And leading up to the 2004 bond referendum, the board did establish what we call eligibility criteria for each of the land categories. Relating to agricultural lands, there is criteria set for purchase of development rights or less than fee simple full purchase for the purpose of preserving and protecting agricultural operations in perpetuity. The Sexton Ranch Agricultural Conservation Project is really the first project, the only project on the current Land Acquisition Advisory Committee list that is on the list with the primary focus of purchasing development rights to protect agricultural operations. Just as an orientation map, this property, about 462 acres or so, is about 1.5 miles north of State Road 60 on either side of 82nd Avenue. If you look more closely at the property, there's really three main pieces to it. There's actually, though it's all the Sexton family, Sexton Ranch, also known as Treasure Hammock Ranch, there's actually, technically there's two ownerships. There's the Ralph Sexton Revocable Living Trust, which, as it's shown on the overhead, that ownership is what we're calling the West Easement, which is about 300 acres actually west of 82nd Avenue, but also includes property about on the south side of 37th, east of 82nd Avenue. We also have part of the ownership that's technically owned by the Ranch Management Consultants, Inc., which is again also part of the Sexton family. As far as acreage, the east easement on the north side of 37th Street is about 123 acres. It's about 41.5 acres or so south of 37th and about 298 acres west of 82nd. One of the things we looked at when we were working with the Sextons on this easement project was to account for the road rights-of-way projects that are being planned, particularly 82nd Avenue, and thought was given to that. And just want to point out early on that the 82nd Avenue was considered through the DOT studies and is not included as part of the easement project. We also contemplated and accounted for potential future extension of 37th Street west of 82nd Avenue.
Roland, what did that just mean? Are we going to get the easement for 82nd Avenue in this process, or will it be bought with dollars separately as a part of this? Or, I mean,
this is totally separate from the road project. We just made sure that there was no overlap of the proposed easements with the proposed right-of-way, so there's no conflict in the future.
Okay, that's what. Okay.
Any right-of-way that would be needed for 82nd Avenue, DOT would have to buy with, or whatever with road project funds. This is not anything to do with that.
And we're just not we wouldn't, if in the event this moved forward, we wouldn't be putting a conservation easement over the top of right-of-way.
Right, we're just avoiding that so we don't pose conflicts. The other point I want to make about the road widening was we contemplated in talking with the Sextons that once you have an improved, widened road, right now the Sextons herd cattle across the road, which is a dirt rural road, and the conclusion is that opportunity is going to go away. So part of the thinking on this was to establish the east and west of 82nd as an opportunity for those to operate independently as independent operations, which I'll get into a proposal here that they'd be able to establish barns and corrals on the east side, which they don't have right now, to supplement what they already have west, so the need to cross the road would go away when the road improvements occur. The other thing to point out is that there are Sebastian River Water Control District canal rights-of-way that are pointed out on the overhead that kind of segment the western piece into 3 pieces. And because of these features, you know, one of the concepts of this easement is that although it's all currently in Sexton ownership, it could conceivably be divided up into up to 5 ownerships, pretty much as you see on the overhead. The 2 pieces east of 82nd, and then the western piece could conceivably be divided into 3 ownerships, adding up to a total of 5. Now, they would all be subject to the proposed easements and obligated to honor those, but it does allow for that potential ownership change. This is a kind of a detail map. What the different colored polygons on there, it's an effort to identify some of the natural occurring areas that still exist on this ranch property. Essentially, there's over 100 acres or so of pine flatwoods. It's been divided here into what's been termed heavily wooded and moderately wooded. There's also some scattered isolated wetlands, about 14 acres total. Under this easement, essentially those existing natural resources would be conserved. Any allowed ag uses would be obligated not to be detrimental or to encroach upon those natural areas other than what would be compatible with the protection of those areas. Incidentally, while this is an agricultural purchase, easement protection purchase, it does have environmental characteristics as noted. In particular, we've also observed some listed species, protected species on the property, particularly what's called the caracara is a rare kind of a Mexican eagle that's been, a pair has been seen on the property. So there's a lot of features to this property, though it is, folks, is agricultural conservation easement. Just in general, what the proposed easement would do would be to restrict the use of the property to agricultural uses, except for certain what we would deem nuisance agricultural operations, such as large-scale meat processing or large-scale chicken farms, things that would be perceived as just a nuisance agricultural use. The current use is cattle ranch. This easements allow for other agricultural uses. It's not strictly limited to cattle raising. It would conserve, the easement would conserve existing natural resources, which is just alluded to, which is about 111 acres of pine flatwoods and about 14 acres of wetlands. It would limit the separate ownerships to no more than 5. It would limit residential development to 3 5-acre, what we call residential parcels, where their sections are requesting 3 cutouts of 5-acre parcels that they could use for the Sexton family. From a standpoint of the zoning and land use designation of the property currently, a no action or what could happen to the property under the zoning. This is a 1 unit per 5-acre agricultural zoning. It's outside the urban service area. Based on the acreage, the estimate is you could probably get about 93 5-acre lots if it was developed for that purpose. So these easements, if purchased, would prohibit that opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, the easements would also allow for the 2 farmsteads, which would be the one existing west of 82nd and establishment of another one east for ag operations. It also allows for the upkeep and use of existing structures. There's also a provision in the easement that would give the county a right to purchase any landowner's interest if the landowner fails to maintain 60% or more of the ownership in active ag for 5 years or more. There's been some discussion on whether 5 years is an appropriate time frame to allow for inactive ag. And talking with the Sextons, they were kind of thinking in the cattle raising mode, and but essentially this is tied to the criteria of the county's bond fund. In the bond fund, it references 2 years. In this easement, we're going with 5. But essentially, the point is, if it goes to something other than active, viable agriculture, the county has the opportunity to go in there and buy out the remaining ownership. There's also a provision that if there's any change of ownership within the allowance of the easement, that the county would be notified whenever that change of ownership is proposed. And the county would have the opportunity to step in if it felt it's what the county desired to negotiate a purchase at that point. Getting down to the actual negotiated purchase price, and this has been part of the issue with, and we're moving towards getting revised appraisals, but the negotiated purchase price is $12 million, which translates to about 25,970 per acre. This is actually 60% of the appraised value of the easement, which was $43,000 per acre. And it's 54% of the full fee value of the property, which when these appraisals were obtained by the county in February 2006 was estimated at $48,000. As I mentioned, these appraisals were obtained in February 2006. It took some time to negotiate the specifics of the easement, so the appraisals are somewhat stale. There's also issues, and this was one of the discussions that lacked, that given the price of land as it had peaked and has apparently come down since these appraisals were gotten, we are getting the revised appraisals, which are due at the end of the month. Given the fact that the negotiated purchase price is 60% of what was the appraised value of the easement, while we expect the appraised values to come down, staff is fairly confident that the negotiated purchase price will still be below the appraised value, but we will see when the revised appraisals come in. There are minuses to buying easements or development rights versus out full purchase. Public access is limited as opposed to other conservation land purchases which the county owns outright, where the public can essentially access at any time. Under this proposal, the property would remain in private ownership, so the public access would be limited. The other drawback is this type of purchase, there are no state programs that are really geared towards matching funds for this type of purchase, and we coordinated with the county's acquisition consultant, the Conservation Fund, and our conclusion was that there really were no viable match opportunities for this type of purchase. If you compare that to the pluses, again, the alternative of no action would be that it's in an area that is just outside the urban service area, and although the market may be depressed right now, it's in an area that is ripe for not now, but eventual conversion to 5-acre residential lots. The other point, as far as the no public access, the Sextons have agreed to some level of public access at least 2 times a year for educational purposes and on an appointment basis. So that somewhat allows for public access to some limited extent. The negotiated purchase price compared to the current appraisals is about 54% of the full value of the property. So in that respect, it's tantamount to a match. We've bought property for full purchase up 80-90% range, and this being 54% of that value can be somewhat construed as tantamount to having a match. The other point I want to make is that, as I was alluded to earlier, although this is an agricultural protection easement project, the Sexton Ranch is unusual, and it really has characteristics that falls under all 3 categories of the bond objectives, which is to conserve natural lands, which the property has, to conserve agricultural operations, and also the cultural heritage, landscape, historic component. I think we all recognize the Sextons as a pioneer family of the county. And certainly there are other such families, but there are certainly some cultural heritage aspects to continuation of the Sexton Ranch. The other point under plus is the management costs will be, there would be no management costs that we typically are saddled with full land acquisition. In this case, the private landowner will be obligated to fulfill the conditions of the easements is to keep the property in active agriculture and to preserve the natural resources. The county's cost will be fairly minimal compared to outright ownership and management responsibilities. We will be obligated to do regular periodic monitoring of the easement to make sure that it's complied with, but compared otherwise, we won't have those management costs that we would otherwise. Also, it stays on the tax rolls, albeit this is a ag property with agricultural tax greenbelt exemptions, but it does stay on the tax rolls, which it would not otherwise. When it did go to the Land Acquisition Advisory Committee, the minutes had some good discussion. The minutes are attached to the staff report. In the end, the committee voted 14-1 to recommend that the board approve the purchase, conditioned upon the updated appraisals supporting the negotiated purchase price. One thing I want to point out is subsequent to the Land Acquisition Committee's consideration of the easements, the Sexton's attorney did approach county staff and requested that there be amendment to the easement language to allow the Sextons to participate in a tax-free exchange under the Internal Revenue Code. We did explore this with our attorneys and with the Conservation Fund's attorneys, and they concluded it's not an unusual request. It's just another opportunity for the seller, and it doesn't adversely affect the county's interest in the easement. So staff had no objection to that language for amendment. Just to sum up, staff's recommendation is to approve exercise of the option conditioned upon a revised appraisal supporting the purchase price, to authorize staff to amend the agreement to allow for the tax-free exchange language, and to authorize staff to proceed with the due diligence in closing.
Okay. Is that it?
Yes, thank you.
Any questions of staff from any members of the commission? If not, we'll open the public hearing. I think what we'll do, how many people want to speak on this? Okay, why don't we, Joe's the representative. Joe.
The rule states, sir, that the man shall stand and address the chair. I stood and addressed the chair.
Thank you, Ray. We haven't adopted Robert's rules. Anyway, Mr. Collins is a representative. I think if they'd like to go first, and then we can go around the room, and anybody that wants to speak, that they're more than welcome.
Good morning. I think...
Excuse your name, please.
Yeah, I'm Joe Collins, attorney for the Sexton family. As I understand it, this is a little bit of an unusual process. You do intend to continue the public hearing until February 20th. Is that correct?
Well, that's uncertain. That was my thinking because of the appraisal and so on and so forth, but it would be up to the board to make that decision.
Could I ask, I think it's very appropriate to take the testimony of the people that are here. I'd prefer to defer my presentation until the 20th, but I would ask that you go ahead and vote that that's what your intention is to do, and then let the public speak, and then we'll continue it on February 20th. Each of you has expressed an interest in knowing the updated appraisal information. We understand that, and we support you in wanting to have that information.
I think that's fine with me. What's the pleasure of the board? Would you like, as Mr. Collins suggested, have people that wish to speak now and continue that? He wants to know whether he wants to continue it, so whether to give his presentation now or February 20th. So if the board would give me some direction, we could let Mr. Collins know what the intention is.
If we're going to hear testimony today and base our decisions on February 20th, I believe that it would be in the best interest of this topic and discussion to postpone until that point. We're basing our decision on an appraisal that was effected on 12/19, and I believe that is a year old. And I believe that if we were making a decision in the private sector, we would be asked to leave the room, and I don't think anybody here would make a decision on an appraisal that was a year old. Such being the case, I believe that we should table this until the 20th so that we have the opportunity to review the updated appraisal and have the LAC committee also have the opportunity to bolster their decision or deny their decision based on the updated appraisal. And I believe hearing the testimony today will only add further confusion to the decision that we have to make about this cultural diamond.
Are you, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Are you proposing that this go back to LAC too?
That's correct. LAC has requested an updated appraisal, I understand, and if they do, they should have the opportunity to review that updated appraisal, and I think in all fairness to the taxpayer, the commission, the LAC committee, who has worked very hard, staff, and the Sexton family, I believe that all of this should be postponed until the 20th so that we have all fair and accurate information.
Let me just clarify that the county staff had ordered the revised appraisals before it went to the acquisition committee. We advised the committee of that, and they did vote to support the purchase, conditioned upon the appraisal supporting the value. Certainly, we have no objection. It would make sense that once the appraisals come in to share that with the LAC for them to either ratify their recommendation or to change it.
And I understand their request for the updated appraisal, and regardless of their decision, I believe that their decision should be made on the updated appraisal and not the appraisal that is now a year old. The market has changed significantly, I don't know, for the better or worse for that property, but that remains to be seen. I think that everybody is owed the opportunity to review the updated appraisal.
The only thing I would ask is, that I think if there's people, is that a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to postpone any and all discussion on this matter until February 20th, when I believe the updated appraisal, the LAC committee, and the public can all be heard before this commission.
Yeah, the only thing, I think if there's people here that would like to be part of the public record that maybe can't make it to the next meeting.
Yeah.
Their testimony may change, sir, with the appraisal may change as well, and perhaps maybe more people will be in attendance or less people will be in attendance based on that appraisal. And I think that we're just waiting on false numbers, and we'll hear testimony that is geared towards an appraisal that may be grossly inaccurate.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a problem with postponing, but I still think that those individuals that came out here to address this issue, there may be people out there that want to discuss this based on the merits of as far as whether it meets the criteria for the purchase through the bond dollars, not necessarily the price. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's plenty of people that want to talk about the price too, both pro and con. I just don't think that we advertised a public hearing. We ought to have the public hearing and just postpone the decision until the 20th, whenever we get the new information.
And also leave it open for further public review.
Absolutely.
And hearing.
Yes, sir. I don't believe we can put enough input and enough public scrutiny behind any decision we make up here.
I'd like to update my motion then in order to hear it today, but continue until the 20th with the updated appraisal and afford the public the opportunity for further input for our decision.
Good. I'll second that motion, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Collins. And Ray, I just want to, go ahead, come on up. We'll recognize your.
You recognize me. Next time I'll come incognito. Reverend Ray Sent. I live at 1615 71st Court here in Indian River County. What I wanted to address was the fact that in speaking to people in the public about this, and it's pretty much of a topic, they don't understand, quite frankly. They're talking about the purchase of land, and land is not being purchased. In the first place, all the land belongs to God, and I doubt very much if many of the people who go out and do these appraisals even consult Him at all. But and seriously now, here's the thing. We deal in a nation that is a very legalistic nation. And many of the public do not know that nobody ever owns land. You own a bundle of legal rights. You purchase a right to do something, and that's all you get is a piece of paper. And if you're not smart enough to go down and record it in the county courthouse, then it's worthless also, because all that is legal is what's on record. Nobody is purchasing the Sexton property. What the Sextons have asked is that this county reach a legal agreement with them to allow them to stay on their land and to keep it as, quote, God made it. Their agricultural pursuits are well known within this county. We've got a lot of Johnny-come-latelys that, well, Sexton's just the name of an outfit that sells all kinds of restaurant supplies, and this isn't that portion of a Sexton family. It's so hard to put together opinions when we've got a lot of what we'll call city dwellers that have moved in, okay? And they think it's a nice place down there. Boy, look at all that acreage and just look how many houses we could put in there. I know that recently I have a cousin here that owns land. I don't. I have the legal right to live on that little plot that I have, and they think they own it, but they don't. But the point is they were offered $90,000 an acre for their grove. Just to buy the legal right to change it from a grove and go in and put in houses. Now, can you imagine? Sure, we're talking about, well, some of the people say, well, take it off the tax roll. No, they aren't. They're going to pay their taxes. Not any different than anybody else. They just want to continue to live on a piece of property that the family has owned for years and years and years and continue their agricultural pursuits. And that's all there is to it. And it's not a question of value whatsoever. If you could pay them $50,000 an acre if you wanted to. We haven't. We've paid $90,000 and $100,000 an acre for land around this county recently. The county has, and I don't think the $25,000. If you stop and think about the value of, I'm sure that somewhere out here in this august gathering there are people that are Greenpeace people, right? And all I can say for you Greenpeace people, man, let's get the word out that Sextons are trying to help everybody to have a better environment. The mention was made of twice-a-year access for educational purposes. Very recently, the school board, one newly hired teacher took it upon themselves to just eliminate basically the agricultural aspect. Here in this county, the 4-H was very, very active for a long, long time. And all of a sudden, we've got somebody that, well, all I can tell you is this, that Elbert Hubbard once said that a college education is one derived by listening to lectures given by college professors and reading books written by college professors who got their education by listening to lectures by college professors and reading books written by college professors. And the next thing you know, why we don't have any cattle in the 4-H program here in Indian River County in the school system, because we hired somebody from out of town that just said, well, they haven't looked at the updated books. Well, I'm telling you that there's nothing that's ever going to compare with the Sexton Ranch and not that's left in our county. And they will allow people to come out there a couple times a year and look at it and see why they made the request that they did. They are not a wealthy family, in spite of what some people might think when I speak in terms of wealth, because they can't just say, well, you know, we'll just donate. You just let us stay here, you know, don't pay us anything. They don't have that ability. Where are they going to move it to? Montana? Snow's out there. Okay? So they like it here in Indian River County. And I would like to think that people in Indian River County are astute enough to recognize this and to realize. Down in the St. Lucie County area, you know, we've had the Adams Ranch down there for years and years and years, and they've got a similar program going down there from the standpoint of access to it and all. So I'm asking the people to to be prepared to, well, you were prepared this morning. When I looked at all the chairs they had out there and all the empty seats that are here right now, I guess there are a lot of people just really don't care. But I care. And there are people sitting here who care. And there's who oppose, and think, oh, that'd be a beautiful site for 5-acre ranchettes, 5-acre ranchette. Boy, that can't beat that. Well, yeah, you could put quite a few of those out there and gain taxes off of them. But what will the county have lost? And that's why I started out by saying that I don't really think that in these various, now, from what the county, the land acquisition people, 14-1. I'm glad to see that 14 people got good common sense. Never mind the books. You heard what the county staff has recommended doing it. And I don't know why the big deal about waiting for appraisals. All we're looking for is a common sense judgment. We're not looking at a business proposition. Amen.
Thank you, Ray.
I'm Sean Sexton, and have a stake in this whole thing, as you might imagine. I have a presentation that I'd like to make, kind of to give you a kind of a view of the ranch. Thank you. That's my wife, Sharon. Let's see, yes, thank you. Kim was saying to me yesterday, when we put up the first visual, we're trying out the AV resources. She said, "Oh my God, that looks like a kind of gravestone." The dates on. And I said, "Well, I hope it's not." Let's see. Okay. The Kenmore Cattle Company, a partnership between Press Gardner, Hubert Graves, Gilbert Barkowski, and my grandfather, was dissolved in 1951, and Waldo received the southmost 160 acres as his portion of the company's holdings. That would be what we are referring to today as the East Easement. This piece and a larger tract to the west of the lateral sea canal running between, we mentioned the Sebastian Drainage District, has become what today is known as Treasure Hammock Ranch. In 1951, my father finished a tour of duty in the Merchant Marines and studies in animal husbandry at the University of Florida, and came home to realize his dream of becoming a cattleman. And he bought the ranch from my grandfather and set about to pay for it with its annual produce of calves. The first thing he did was to place that man in charge, and the second thing he did was to get a job up the road with Dan Richardson, managing a steer grass fattening operation, which was a wonderful idea, much ahead of its time. And he divided his weekly salary and a pair of spurs with Uncle Eddie. And things were very austere for quite a while. The cow pens and the barn and scales and chute and headgate were built around the time Waldo purchased the west side in 1943. This gives you that historical sense of things that we're talking about 64 years, which is a long time in Florida given our elements. 64 years that these structures have been on the ranch. I'll show you pictures of them later that they're all still there. Before he left school, my father helped to found with other producers a record-keeping organization called the Florida Beef Cattle Improvement Association, under the oversight of Dr. Marvin Koger, a pioneer cattle researcher who was one of his professors. And my dad was eager to implement its programs of performance testing, which he had learned about at Florida, tying the annual production of each cow to its progeny and using this information in making decisions for genetic selection of the herd. That was 1953. We've got 60 years of records on our cow herd now. They were originally in this giant mainframe computer in Gainesville. Jim Pace, that fellow smoking the cigar there and writing numbers down, would take the data back to Florida, and they'd have a key punch operator enter it on cards and feed it into the mainframe computer. And at one point, this computer reached critical mass, and I think it started spewing out cows. And so things have kind of improved in the computer world. But the premise of the performance testing was that you had to number the I'm sorry, I guess I'm not doing that. You had to number the calves and tie them to their mother's number at birth, and then write their weights down when you weigh them. Cattle are sold by the pound, so a set of scales is an essential ingredient of a cattle operation, a serious one anyway. Jim Pace said anybody who thinks scales aren't important has already paid for them. And so this brings us to the present, and an overview of the ranch. Our ranch is characterized as an intensive grazing operation. It comprises a whole mosaic of different kinds of land. By the fact of its lay, there are high and low places. There are woodlands, open tracts, big wetlands. We've listed them on that resource map. Except for the effects of several recent hurricanes, the ranch is basically in the same condition it was when my grandfather bought it 64 years ago. A long recognized parcel of providing an ideal production environment for cattle is the benefit of such places for other kinds of wild creatures and plants of Florida's outback. We revel in these things and do much for them in maintaining a good place for our cattle. By the fact of being there, we have all these other things that are there too. I should mention that we have a cottage industry of growing greens too, and we have greens merchants who come and pick them and sell them. And the pastures are managed in a rotational grazing system that's been in place since the 1950s, and in 1957, Treasure Hammock Ranch entered into a conservation plan with the Soil Conservation Service, and they came out and they mapped our soils and our resources, our water systems. They made recommendations about cross-fencing, that we would be more conservative toward the pasture and that we would perpetuate our sod by doing these things. And a thought that everyone should have, this might be a new thought, is that we've been doing all this within this confine. We haven't used it up and moved somewhere. And what you're looking at is balance. Our cattle are still producing industry standard weights and weaning calves that are the pride of the industry, and it's been going on 60 years. We have what a common word defines as sustainability. In addition to human families affected by the decision to preserve agriculture in Indian River County, in our case, are the cow families that have developed and thrived within our systems and resources. The production life of a cow ranges from 12 to 15 years. We have some 19 and 20-year-olds too. And the generation interval is 3. So I've known many generations of cows in my lifetime. That's Mean Red's daughter's daughter, and she also tries to hook you when you tag her calf. And these are personalities, and these are entities, albeit animal entities that we're as familiar with as we are members of our own family. We have become familiar with these animals and accomplished the work of maintaining these lands in a mutually beneficial human-animal cooperation with many different lineages of cattle developed and descended on this ranch. This cow, her son is that bull, and his daughter is that calf. And that other cow she's no longer on the ranch. We sold her to Bob Crane, and he got a last cow or two out of her, a calf or two out of her. And this cow's calf is that bull that we're in the bull business as well. And we raise seed stock and feeder calves. And the ranch is at the center of a whole community of friends and relatives who come and help and have a stake in its continuation and well-being. The Tripsons figure large in our operation. This community activity is much akin to barn raising and harvesting ceremonies of America's pastoral beginnings, set in a subtropical and post-industrial age. We've watched our children grow up in this place, keeping at the forefront the realization of maintaining and protecting its resources so it will in turn sustain our lives. The story of the ranch is intergenerational, which is to say shared within an entire family over time. The great agriculturalist and writer Wendell Berry said that it takes 3 generations for the farmer to get off of the learning curve. And he's number 4. So we're ready to manage this property into perpetuity. That's that community I'm talking about.
Looks like Toolman.
Sometimes they're different from one work session to the next, but it's that workplace there. That's the a one-of-a-kind wooden chute. Waldo built it, my dad improved it, and I maintain it. I've rebuilt it about 3 times, but it's 60 years old also. It's a pretty amazing thing. And our scales, which they were backed up against in the photograph, there's the same scales. We were the weighing headquarters for the Youth Livestock Association for how many years, Wes?
Probably at least the first 15 years of their existence.
And my dad was the weighmaster, and we had trailers and calves lined up all the way down Ranch Road, offloading and coming in and weighing. And I know this is going to be a struggle, but we think of the ranch as a kind of metaphor for the world, and it even has that circular island in time sort of quality of the earth itself. And much of what happens in the larger sphere outside of the ranch seems in violation of the principles that we've kept in the stewardship on the ranch. Measures will have to be taken within our culture to accomplish a correction of these factors and a realization of the value and the preservation of real things. The decision before you is going to be a milestone of what we hope shall become Indian River County's vision of its future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. That was very interesting. Okay, is there someone else that would like to be heard? Yes, sir, if you take the podium here.
My name is Bill Becker, and I live in Vero Beach, Florida. I'm chairman of the board of the Finance Commission of the City of Vero Beach for the last 8 years. I've looked at a lot of deals for various political people, and I've advised people on the merits of these deals. Just as a little background, my combined companies have total sales of well into the 9 figures. I employ over 1,000 people. There's other Bill Beckers, I understand from an article in the paper today. I'm a Bill Becker that has been married to the same woman for 20 years. I've never been in any lawsuits with any of my family members. I live here in Indian River County, and I love it. I do not know the Sextons, and I appreciate the heritage and the history of their ranch and what they've done and what they're doing. If I were the Sextons, I would be trying to do this deal as well. In my opinion, this is a bad deal for Indian River County for only one reason. The reason is that the county should buy their land with this bond money. They should buy it because they have matching funds available. They're not using matching funds here. They're not getting any leverage off this. You're going to spend $12 million, and the county is going to get nothing. The citizens of Indian River County are going to get nothing. The taxpayers are going to get nothing. The reason why these bonds are in place is so that we can take away and preserve all these wonderful lands that we've all been enjoyed our whole lives. I was born and raised in Florida, and I see the stuff that's going on in Florida, and it makes me very, very sad. And I personally, on an ongoing basis, try to preserve various things in Florida. I live in a house that's 60 years old. My next door neighbor just died at the age of 101, was one of the pioneers of Vero Beach. And I am doing everything I can to buy their home and keep it away from developers. I believe in that. I think we have to do that. But I truly believe that with the state matching funds available, that instead of paying $25,000 an acre to preserve this so that the Sextons can continue doing their business and that the county and the various citizens can have nothing to do with it, I think it'd be much more appropriate for this council, this commission, to be working diligently to buy properties like this, using the matching funds available out there and getting more bang for your buck. And I'm going to give you an example. The proposal is $25,000 approximately an acre. Now, the appraisal that's a year old was $48,000 an acre. I think we can all pretty much agree that there's not a whole lot of buyers running around Indian River County right now for land like this. So I would be surprised if it's still $48,000, but let's use $48,000. We're going to pay $25,000, and this county is not going to get 1 acre. We're not even going to get the easement rights for that land that some government entity is going to have to buy again at some point in time in the future. But there are matching funds out there that each and every one of you know. They have been used many times before to buy land. So if you have $25,000 an acre in cash to pay for the development rights, and the value is $48,000, you need $23,000 more per acre, and the county will actually own the land forever. Everyone here can walk on that land. They can bring their children on that land. They can do whatever within the rules and regulations that are set up for that land. Those matching funds are available. You guys know it. There are no matching funds available for these development rights. Get the matching funds, matching 1 for 1, and buy land. Let's buy a bunch of land. Let's preserve the character and nature of Indian River County. I'm 100% agreeing with that. But let's not give people millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to preserve their private enterprise. That's what we're all here for in the United States. It's private enterprise. That's the beauty of the United States. We have the ability to work as hard as we can, to make much money as we can, to have an impact in our community. And I just see this as a one-way street at a ridiculous amount of money, when we should be seriously looking at using this money and getting leverage off that money with matching funds to buy land and to preserve that land and to create wonderful green space for our children, our children's children to enjoy for many, many generations. This land will not be made available to your generations. It is private property. And we're paying millions of dollars for that right not to touch that land. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I need to have the people in the back, need to find seats. The fire marshal says we're not supposed to do this. And I think we'll start, if we can, I guess we're in the middle section. We'll go across, then we'll come back. But we'll let everybody speak that would like to speak. And also, remember, this is a public hearing. Let's all be courteous and polite to each other. No more applauding, no more anything. Let's just be courteous and polite and go through this in a business sense. Mr. So-and-so, Mr. what, not so-and-so, Mr. Would you like to take the podium, please?
Joe Clark.
If the next person that wants to speak could come to the next podium, we'll go back and forth.
Mr. Chairman, ladies, members of the council, local residents, this is not a new program.
We need your name and address.
My name is Joe Clark. I live on A1A in North Hutchinson Island.
Thank you.
I've been around Vero Beach since 1943.
Okay.
I couldn't work here because I never could get a job here. I had to go someplace else, but I came back. I've been aware of the Sexton Range since 1943. Howard County, Maryland, which is a small county, population similar to Indian River County, Florida, with about the same acreage and size, lies between Baltimore and Washington, astride Route 29 and astride Route 70N. Last week I spoke with the officer in Howard County, and they have in their inventory 19,500 acres of agricultural set-aside land. They call it agricultural preservation. Now in California, they just put 2 big ranches in. I read about in one of the agricultural papers recently, and they call it the California Ranchland Trust. And both these ranches they put in there were several thousand acres. I'm talking about 20,000, 30,000. And the same thing, they pay the developer to stay on the ranch, not to develop it, or pay the owner of the ranch not to develop it. Now, in Howard County, Maryland, my brother's farm lies adjacent to the urban services area. His land went into the agricultural preservation about 1970. And that land today is still intact and still farming, still raising beef cattle. My brother's passed away. My oldest brother lived on a farm up in a different part of the county. He put his land in agricultural preservation about 1980. He's dead and gone. Land's transferred. The land is protected. It's still farmed. As a matter of fact, the fellow owns it now. He used to live in Fort Lauderdale, and now he's up there with that property. He's from there originally. And this has gone on in that area since about 1970. Many of the lands have transferred or been inherited or been sold, but the land is still open. It's still being farmed for the intended use. Now, you buy the land, then you got to take care of it. Then you lose the taxes on it. The farmer pays the taxes. Certainly they reduce taxes. There are taxes on agricultural land. They're not taxes on cookie cutter houses. Once the urban services area moves in, you get water and sewer. Forget the 5 houses, 5 acre lots. It goes down to, I developed 10 acres in Howard County in 1974, and I got 32 houses on 10 acres. I took my money and ran to Vero Beach. And I still own property. I don't own any property there now. I've divested myself of all real estate, except for 2 condos, one here and one there. And so, in effect, I walked out and left that county with 32 houses to provide water, sewer, street lights, police, and schools for, and took my $200,000 and ran. Now, that same next adjacent piece of property, which was the front lawn of my mother's house, has since been put into land preservation because the public felt that they would rather have that than a nursing home in the front yard. And they bought the rights, and once you buy the rights, you can't get a building permit. Once you sell the rights, you can't get a building permit. You're done. You're stopped dead. Now, Mr. Becker says buy the land. If you buy the land, you got to take care of it. Now, who here is going to go out and take care of 460-some acres? Keep it mowed. Keep it drained. You want to keep your cattle on it, you got to keep the fences up. You ever try to keep up a couple of miles of fence in this environment where it's rusty? In today's press journal, another Mr. Becker entered an article. He says buy the land. So one Becker outdoes the other Becker. So here we are, and here's Joe Clark in the middle. Thank you.
Now we're going to Becker.
Good morning. Joseph Paladin. I'm chairman of the Growth Awareness Committee, and I live at 6450 Tropical Way. And I'm one of those bad developers that Mr. Becker mentioned that build everything here in Indian River County. First of all, I don't know how anybody could have anything negative at all to say about the Sexton family. They're such nice people. And I don't use the word nice as a light part of my vocabulary. They're just nice people. I have a couple of questions. One is on the $12 million sale price and on the new appraisal. Am I to understand that the sale price will be based on 60% of the new appraisal, or it'll be $12 million as long as the appraisal doesn't come in under $12 million?
Right now, the option agreement that signs for $12 million, that's the current price. If the value comes down to something that's higher than that, the relative percentage would change. And then at that point, it would be the commission's decision whether to exercise that option or not. But right now, the $12 million would not change under the current option. It's not a relative to the appraisal.
Thank you, Roland. I appreciate that. Secondly, I think that 90% of the ambiance of this property, I drove out there on the property yesterday morning for quite a bit. Matter of fact, I think Sean out there in his pickup truck at the time. And like I said, I think 90% of the ambiance of that property is probably the fact that the Sexton family is ranching it and that they had to have an ongoing business there doing ranching and doing agriculture. I think that's what makes half of the attractiveness of the parcel itself, of the property itself. So I think it's important that we keep them in ranching and don't just buy a piece of property so much and have a dead piece of property that wouldn't have any activity on it that maybe we couldn't utilize or maybe we could utilize. I have a problem with buying property or putting money into property for the county and using taxpayers' money where the taxpayers don't have access to it. But without the Sexton people there to ranch this property and do the agriculture, it would use its draw. It would really use its attractiveness. I would like to see a way that we can go ahead and take these development rights and instead of extinguishing these development rights, maybe have the county name a third-party beneficiary, like the Audubon or like some other group that was agreeable to the county commissioners, LAC, I don't know, and maybe set up a mitigation bank to where we can store these development rights to where maybe we could put a cap on something like the ag PDs we're doing outside the urban service line. We just brought forth some new amendments to it or new comp plan changes. You know, one unit per 5 acres, even at maybe 1 unit per 10 acres, we have a lot of ideas. We can do a lot of things with ag PDs and make them work. But when you get out there at 1 unit per 20 acres in that area, maybe there's some areas out there ag PDs are going to have a hard time working at 1 per 20 acres. And maybe if we had a number we put a cap on so we didn't overdevelop out there and stayed around that 17,000, 20,000 unit number that we have out there. Maybe we could use some of those development rights if we put it in a mitigation bank of some kind to sell to developers as long as we stayed under that 1 unit per 5 or 1 unit per 10 acres, just so we got some value for it, so we could use that value. So indirectly, we'd be using developers to pay for this $12 million. Indirectly, we would use development funds to pay for the cost of buying these own development rights instead of using just the bond issue and just having $50 million. If we could set up a mitigation bank and do it intelligently and legally, we could use that $50 million over and over and buy a lot of land out there and save a lot of land. It's just a thought process I'd like for you all to consider. That would be the only thing that I would like to see. I'd like to see that $50 million to be used over and over again and not just to go away on a few purchases. Because, you know, if you look at it the other way, if you look at development rights, on an acreage parcel cost factor, I don't think this is, you know, out of the range or unbelievable at all. And like the other gentleman said, the market's down a little bit right now, but before you know it, it's going to come back, and we have to react to what we know is going to happen, not what's already happened. You know, if we react to what's happened in the past 3 years, it doesn't matter. We might as well step back to 1992 because the economy and the sales here are back in that area. So I don't think that it's safe to say it's not going to be developed. I think we have to look at the fact that it will be developed someday if we don't do something about it. I just like to see it done with funds that we can use from development money, not from just the bond money. If there's some way of setting that up, I'd just like you all to consider that somehow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you very much. My name is Joseph Fonte, and for anybody that would like to drive by, I live at 441 Holly Road on the Barrier Island. It's a bluish green house with white trim, and I have several beautiful live oaks around and about. I suppose that I'm one of the bad city slickers that came down here. I did so about 30 years ago or so. I am a city slicker, I guess. Some people would consider me as such, but I feel just as comfortable walking around a farm in West Virginia as I do riding the A train at the wee hours in the morning. If I had a choice to go either place, I suppose I'd have to flip a coin. This summer I had an occasion to drink unpasteurized, unhomogenized milk on a dairy farm in New Jersey. My friend is up at 4 o'clock in the morning milking cows, and 4 o'clock in the afternoon he repeats the same process 365 days a year. I invited him down here to Florida, but he can't get away. So I most certainly have no aversion to farms. I've helped plant tobacco, I've picked tobacco, spudded tobacco, I think that's what it was called, put it up in the barn, grew corn, sold cherry tomatoes in New York City, down in the village, back in the early 70s. Sold as many as I could grow. That's a little bit personal history. To be specific, there's a gentleman who I don't know, and I most certainly respect everybody that I come across as a, respect him as a human being, everybody that I come across. I have tons of friends, and I'm saturated with acquaintances, so I'm not adverse to offending anybody, but I don't mean to at any. It's not my specific goal. There's a gentleman, one person that voted against this, referred to this property, and he used the word magnificent. I don't know if that's a reflection of an inadequate vocabulary or a lack of sophistication. I think of magnificent property as 1,000 Islands, Cape Hatteras, the Adirondacks, the Appalachian Mountains, the Rockies, Grand Canyon. That's breathtaking. Did I mention 1,000 Island? Breathtakingly beautiful property. This magnificent property here in Indian River County stretches all the way across the state. There's tons of it. What there isn't tons of is beach property that's accessible to the public. As I said before, I have no aversion to walking around a farm. There's plenty of farmland in Indian River County. There's plenty of farmland throughout the rest of the state. What we need to do, what I think you ought to do if you're going to spend money, is look over on the Barrier Island, which has nothing. I happen to live there, but I'm not near the beach access area. If I were going to spend $12 million, I would go over, have every one of you go over there. By the way, I'm trying to be real nice today because I appreciate that you continue this, because this gentleman already made a presentation, and I felt it was right and fitting for you people to continue and let the public be heard. And I appreciate that. So I'm really trying, I have to try to be nice in front of politicians. I would have you people go over, as some of you well know. Excuse me, is this thing, what is this thing? Is this relevant to me? Do you know what this is? What is this? No.
Yeah, that red button that says do not push.
What is this for this?
That's the eject button.
Okay.
Yeah.
The eject button. I would go over, I would ask you to, little levity never hurts. I would ask you to go over to the South Beach and try to find a place to park in the almost any time on the weekends, I guess. I don't go there myself. I walked. I'm lucky I can walk to the beach, but try to find a place to park. That's city property, basically. That property is in the domain of the city of Vero Beach. But it's still, everything is in the county. There's where I think you ought to be looking, if you're going to look for property, to buy some of the smaller, older homes that have no value. The land is valuable, much more valuable than this magnificent piece of property out on 82nd Street or Avenue or whatever it is. Excuse me. I would think that here I go, I almost got caustic. I would think that the people who look into this ought to, well, let me get a little caustic, ought to give their compass needle a spin and get headed in the right direction. There's plenty of farm, I don't call that farm, that's scrub, that's bush out there, in all respect to the people who live there. There's two parts of Indian River County, the beach and the bush. And I would say that you ought to look and think about providing access to the beach, the ocean, for the people who are going to come into Indian River County, regardless of what you do. I think you have an obligation to do that. I came down here for I'm trying to be brief. I came down here for two reasons, the weather and the ocean. I was in the ocean this morning. I think the temperature's about 80 degrees. I try to get there every day. That's why I'm here. I'm not here to walk around somebody's farm once every 6 months. I'm lucky I can do that anytime I want to. I have to leave the state. I think that you people should think about this, think about the value, not to the people that own the property, but think about the value that's going to be afforded to the general population. This piece of property is completely useless to me as a taxpayer. And I don't think Anybody's going to benefit from it. And I don't care if houses are built out there or not, to be honest with you. If somebody put houses on the barrier island, if I had my choice going back years ago, I would have allowed no building on the barrier island. And if I had my choice today, I had the federal government come in and nationalize the barrier island the way they did up in Cape Cod. And everybody thought that that was going to be the end of Cape Cod. Well, I don't like the water or the people up there. They're both too cold. But I would say little humor. But I would say that Cape Cod is one of the most successful resorts in this entire country. So you heard enough from me. I most certainly am definitely opposed to this. And I think you should trash it. Trash it. Otherwise, I'm going to think that it's some sort of a heist.
Thank you,
Good evening.
Mr. Heddy.
Hello, Commissioners. Brian Heddy, Vero Beach, Florida. I'm not going to tell you what people think of me because you'd throw me out if I used that kind of language. And I'm not going to go over there because I know what that button's for. Anyway, the Sextons would like $12 million. The governing authorities want to spend our money. The Sextons would like to preserve the property. The environmentalists within the governing authorities would like to protect the property. There's people with an eye on tax dollars that say to spend the money on this is not good because you're not getting anything. Other people are saying, well, no, we're okay because they're going to farm it in perpetuity. And there's lots of opposing sides on the issue, and I would like to present to you a way of accomplishing all of that. You still get to spend your $12 million, Sexton still gets the money, and the property still stays farmed. And how do you do that? Just reverse what you're doing. Okay? What you're doing right now is you're spending $12 million and giving them the ability to farm it in perpetuity. Give them the $12 million, give us the title to the property, lease it back to them for $5,979. That's the current tax out there. The taxpayers lose $0. They get their $12 million. You get the property protected forever because the county holds title to it. You'll wind up with every single thing you want. Lease it back to them. Let them farm it in perpetuity. But we'll own it. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Sexton.
Hi, my name is Sharon Sexton. I'm married to Sean. I just want to talk about the land use the way I've experienced in the last 25 years. My husband and I had small children over the last few years. Now they're in college and high school. And we live in a transient society. We buy a house thinking that we'll live there for a while and then sell it, move on to the next thing. It's rare that we treasure something with the idea that it will last a lifetime. The animals I'm a huge animal lover, and what I want to say is there's a question about have we shared this property with the community. We've had hundreds of artists come out, writers, composers. One of the composers wrote something called the Mosquito Suite. It's been a haven for bird lovers. Sean and I can only speak for us because it hasn't been a public thing with our family, but I know all of us have shared the land with anybody who has ever asked to come out and see it. We've worked with the Boy Scouts, helped kids get their Eagle things. We've done, tons of stuff with the ag. And now that they've cut out all the high school, what I see with these children that are not raised in any kind of a natural environment, when they come to the ranch, we've had groups of kids that were troubled and in danger and there'll be like 35 of them running onto the property, and the first thing they try to do is step on every bug, snatch up every flower. I had goats at the time, chase my goats, and it's an opportunity to tell people that, this is God's lands, God's creatures, we need to take care of things. And I just feel as a people we're so removed nature and property and land. And I just wanted to say that if this does happen or it doesn't happen, as long as we have this property, our intent is to share it with people. It may be on a one-on-one basis or small, but I think that I think the land is so important, and it's one of the things that just terrifies me when I see oak trees yanked out with cranes and replaced with 3 palm trees. There isn't one member in my family who we would rather drink poison than sell that land. I don't know if I can talk about 50 years from now or 20 years from now. All I know is when land is gone, it's gone forever. And you can just say, oh my God, when I was a kid, I remember the woods around where we lived. All of us have had that experience. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sexton.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, fellow commissioners. Susie Karen, 8500 Ingeria Road, North St. Lucie County. I'm a member of the St. Lucie County Planning and Zoning Board, as well as the vice chair of the TDR Committee and PDR Committee, which is Transfer Development Rights and Purchase of Development Rights. So I have a little bit of a background on what has conspired here. I want to say one thing right off the bat. He who hesitates is lost. What you are being offered here by the Sexton family is a rare opportunity for not only the residents, but the surrounding area of St. Lucie, Melbourne, and everywhere, actually the state of Florida. I'd like you to not table this over and over again. I'd hope that on your February meeting, which I will attend, because I would like to be a part of the history of an approval for such a plan. I do believe that the Sexton family should be honored, and you should embrace this project. And I'll be back on February 20th, and if anybody needs any additional information as far as TDRs or PDRs, St. Lucie County is open and willing to give you any additional information. This gentleman did mention that there are plans out there. If in fact the county doesn't feel they're being compensated, which in my personal opinion it's a steal for you, for what you are getting, there are programs out there that the county can bank. And in St. Lucie County, we're working right now on the TVC, which is Town, Village, and Countryside, which has gotten recognition throughout the state of Florida, that if in fact the development does come in and needs additional density where it is appropriate, these rights can come if in fact the developer gives you a school or gives you something in return. It's not free, they pay for it, and in fact the community gains, wins, and gains. There are beautiful programs out there. Certainly don't shut the door on the openness of that. But this project, I personally would love to be in your position to give it approval so that I could be a part of history. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Ms. Karen?
Yes.
Can I?
Yes.
Tony Robinson, 1111 Indian Mound Trail. I couldn't agree more with that about the price and buying as soon as possible. With the Lost Tree Islands, you'll recall, we balked at paying $8 to $10 million and ended up finally paying about $13 million an acre before we were finished. We should be grateful to the Sextons. It's a wonderful family that they want to continue farming and ranching, that they have not sold out to the developers. If the county buys land, they must manage that land. And that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and personnel the county does not have. This project fulfills all the goals of the environmental of the county for land right now. It's environmentally important, it's agricultural, it's historic in the very best sense of the word. Pine Flatwoods, for instance. Pine Flatwoods were the predominant real estate, predominant land in this county. Now, there's less than 10% of Pine Flatwoods left because it's been destroyed and developed. We know that the property would stay on the tax rolls, and that's important. This would be this county's first experience with a large conservation easement. So we really don't have any firsthand experience to fall back on. But we know that other counties and states have used this to great advantage. I happen to own a home in Michigan, in northern Michigan. There are about 75 large conservation easements up in this area of northwestern Michigan. And what this has done for the economy, for the tourism, for the appeal, the land values, the tax values, is beyond measure. These conservation easements have preserved the quality of life and the very reasons why people go there and buy land. And those people appreciate the natural qualities. And the Sexton Ranch is so outstanding and so unique that I just hope we'll go ahead and use every measure to preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have to take a 10-minute break for our captioning, so we'll be back at 10:41 to continue this.
Your Indian River County Commission meeting is in a brief recess. Please stay tuned. The meeting will reconvene in just a moment. Your Indian River County Commission meeting is in a brief recess. Please stay tuned. The meeting will reconvene in just a moment. Your Indian River County Commission meeting is in a brief recess. Please stay tuned. The meeting will reconvene in just a moment. Your Indian River County Commission meeting is in a brief recess. Please stay tuned. The meeting will reconvene in just a moment. Your Indian River County Commission meeting is in a brief recess. Please stay tuned. The meeting will reconvene in just a moment. Your Indian River County Commission meeting is in a brief recess. Please stay tuned. The meeting will reconvene in just a moment.
We'll call the meeting back to order, and we are in a public hearing. So, ma'am, if you would give us your name and address and then proceed.
Okay, my name is Mary Jane Kelly. I live at 7330 36th Court, but I'm speaking today in my capacity as Executive Director for the Cultural Council of Indian River County. And the Cultural Council obviously wants to preserve historic places, cultural ways of life in this community, and I don't think you could get anything more precious than what's going on out at the Sexton Ranch. I think that's something very much worth preserving. And I think that case has been made. But what I want to speak to is the public access question. The Sextons have made the ranch available for the summer cultural camp kids, and they go out there and they have a wonderful time. And they learn all about ranching, they learn all about the ranch and the way, what's going on there, the animals. It's a total cultural experience. It's not the opera, it's not music, it's a different kind of culture. And it's a very important part of culture of the history of this county. And they've always been accommodating. They've accommodated school children, nonprofit fundraisers. They've done all kinds of things. If you make the arrangements ahead of time, it's not a problem, the public access. I don't think that that's the major issue here. So there's financial decisions that need to be made, and greater minds can make those decisions than mine. But I think from a cultural perspective, it certainly is worth preserving. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jens Tripson. I live at 2525 14th Street, Vero Beach. I'd like to clear up, there's rumors going around about this thing, and probably more than I'm aware of, but I am a descendant of Waldo. I have, and my family has no financial stake in this transaction whatsoever. It's limited to Ralph's immediate family, his children and grandchildren. None of the other Sextons or the Tripsons have any financial interest or stand to profit from this whatsoever. The days of cheap land are over. I think we're all really very aware of that. To make our acquisition funds go further, we're going to have to take opportunities such as buying development rights. We're going to have to utilize that more and more frequently. There was potentially matching funds in the Family Farms Bill, which our state legislatures, in their infinite wisdom, failed for the last 3 years to finance. We would have been able to get funds for that if they hadn't, so maybe we ought to talk to them. This purchase fits all three of the bond referendum criteria. I'm going to put on my Audubon hat right now for Pelican Island Audubon Society, and we pursued and pushed the bond referendum to include not only conservation but historical, cultural preservation and agricultural preservation. When it was voted for by the citizens in 2004, 71% voted in favor of this. I don't think any of those people had in mind to have groups of, that first off, they didn't have in mind that the county was going to run a cow-calf operation. That just wasn't part of the configuration. It was that the families or the owners that were interested in doing that would be managing the ranch and doing it. If you take this out of this transaction and wanted to buy this piece of property, you're probably not going to have a cow-calf operation there. In the long term, you probably wouldn't have agriculture because the county isn't set up to do it. We have the cultural heritage through Waldo and the connections there, and some of the other people, the Graves, Dr. Barkowski. From my point of view, it merges so well with the conservation and agriculture. You have 14 acres of wetlands. We have numerous amphibians and reptiles that use those. The cows use the wetlands, and they're not destroying the wetlands. Those same wetlands have been there in all my life, all the 52 years that I can't remember when I was 2, but the cows have not destroyed that. The 130 acres of pine flatwoods and oak and palm hammocks has still been there. They still have their integrity. I'd like to list some of the animals that is on Audubon field trips that we've seen. Gray fox, raccoons, possums, cottontail and marsh rabbits, flying squirrels, bobcats, 4 species of owls. We have 5 species that are generally native to the permanent natives to the state of Florida. They have 4 of those species there all the time. Red-shouldered red-tailed hawks and the occasional bald eagle. The pastures function as prairies that are also habitat to sparrows, bobwhites, meadowlarks, sandhill cranes, and many of the other species that use the other types of habitat that are there as well. Plus, the cattle are there grazing. So, I mean, this is a win-win situation. I think if we look at this in the long range, 10 years is short range, 20 or 30 years, this is going to be cheap at $12 million to preserve this. Please, on the 20th of next month, vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Good morning, Renee Renzi, Waverly Place and Civic Association. I, as a general member of the population, knew when I voted for this $50 million that it would go towards agricultural development rights as well as historical and environmental. So I'm very satisfied with the use of those funds for this purpose. I haven't been out to the ranch, but I like to think it's there. I'm a city girl, I'm a little scared of cows, but I like to see them driving by. If this goes through, and I hope it does...
Renee, cows driving by scare me.
If it goes through, and I hope it does, I do hope that the sextons will come to some formal agreement with the high school ag students. I was very concerned to read about a month ago that they had to have all their cattle removed from their program because they couldn't afford to keep them up any longer. Seems to me with this on the borders of our city, there might be some formal weekly arrangement maybe to have those students come out and get some hands-on experience because they were all broken-hearted at losing their own cows. So that's my suggestion, and I do hope this goes through. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Dr. Baker?
Hey, thank you. A lot of these issues were discussed when we were planning the referendum. In fact, we've had a whole change up there from 2.5 years ago. You're all new than the original commission that approved having the bond issue. And I think there's an educational thing out there. When we decided to go out with the referendum, we had some workshops, and the sextons participated in these workshops. And their land was actually given as an example of the type of land that we were wanting. And so a lot of the arguments you're finding in here tonight, or today, we were done during those workshops. I am concerned about the agriculture in our county, and one of the great things about our county is our agriculture, both the citrus and the cattle. And we seem to be losing that. And if we had all the money in the world, we'd like to buy it. But it's going to take billions of dollars. It's probably a good week of Iraq. If we were going to buy all the agricultural land here, but we can buy the development rights for a lot cheaper if we're going to be buying more. And so I think that part was a good program. But what's made our program strong is that we've bought at appraised values. And I think I'm glad that you're going ahead for the sake of the program, that you're going to be looking at current appraised values, because I think that's important, because the public needs to continue the trust in the program that we are buying it at appraised values, because once we got out of that, and then I think the public is concerned. And if you look at this and compare it to one of the historic sites that most of you approved, or some of you approved before, we bought a fish house for $8 million.
We didn't buy it?
No, we proposed to buy a fish house for $8 million that didn't exist.
No, it's there.
The fish house is there?
Absolutely.
Let's stick to the ranch.
Okay. Well, the $8 million deal didn't go through.
No.
For the sake of $350,000.
That's correct.
Right? And this land here is our future here. And I think that we need to concern it. What I want, another proposal, we've had some transfer of development rights, and those programs are great too. This is kind of a new program, and Jens kind of mentioned it. But why don't we talk to Mr. Mayfield, our representative, and Senator Pruitt, to have them help us come up with some matching funds. They're proposing to buy that sewer plant, or move the sewer plant for the city of Vero Beach. And this seems to be much more important than that. And I would like to see if they have some power or collateral, that they put it, because this is a new example for the state of Florida. I mean, the state went out and purchased the big ranch, Babcock Ranch, over in the southwest. They've recently helped with the smoothing the Adams Ranch thing, and they've tried in the past to fund money for buying development ranch to protect our agriculture. Everybody out there understands we need to protect our agriculture. We can't rely on South America for all our needs in Publix, and this is one way to do it. And I think we could convince Mr. Mayfield and Mr. Pruitt that this would be a fine example of a program that we need. You've gotten all kinds of comments today. I was it's interesting to see all the biodiversity that we have out here in our human population. But I think the core thing is, it was 14-1 to support this thing. And I hope that you consider the appraised values and then consider whether you want to buy this property or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baker.
My name's Melissa Tripson, and I live at 2525 14th Street. I'm assuming that all of you have gone to the ranch to see what you're going to be voting on. And if not, I really would urge you to go, because quite in contrast with the gentleman who spoke earlier, I would call the property magnificent. And the more time that you spend out there, the more you realize just how important it is for that to remain the way it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So anyone else would like to be heard?
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Sumner Sharman. I have only one question. One thing is a wonderful idea, but what would happen 2 generations down the road if the Sextons, none of them decide to be in the cattle business? What happens to the property at that point? Thank you.
Let me just say that these easements run with the land. If it gets sold to non-Sextons, those new owners would be obligated to comply with the easement, which would be to keep it in agriculture.
I thought I covered that. Is it cattle?
It's not limited under the easement proposal. It would not be limited to cattle. It would be allowed for other agricultural uses, which are spelled out.
Is there anyone else who would like to be heard? If not, we'll temporarily close the public hearing until the meeting of February 20th.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, just a few comments. I had the opportunity, I called Dean Saunders. And Dean was a former legislator during the Childs administration, and wrote a lot of the legislation that provides for conservation easements. And in fact, if he had an area of specialty in real estate, he is heavily involved in real estate, but that is one of what I'd say is one of his areas of specialty. And asked him whether or not we'd have any success in trying to achieve any matching funds for this program, and he said no. Not in the typical light of things. He said, however, there is a program, the Florida Rural and Farmstead Stewardship Act, that has been approved by the legislature. However, the funding for the program was vetoed by the governor and has been for several years. With that program being in place and And I don't know whether we put the cart before the horse or start trying to push now in this legislative session. It may behoove us with these dollars out there, whether we purchase these development rights or not. It may behoove us to start now trying to put some area of emphasis with our lobbyists to have them fund that and make it retroactive also. I would like for us not to, if we could help it, not to be in the situation of buying this and then having the funds available next year and then being for future purchases. So just to throw that out, a little bit of research that I did. Also, is the lady, Miss Cairns from St. Lucie County, she's not here anymore. Did she leave? She left. If I'm not mistaken, what they were trying to do with the Adams Ranch, that would have been, and again, I was hoping she'd be able to confirm these figures, but I think that the 13,000 acres that Adams, I believe it was the total acreage of Adams Ranch, and a part of that was 1 unit per 10 acres, which would have been 1,300 units, which I believe they got $55 million for those units, and you divide them out, and it's very similar to the price per unit that we're looking at here, if you do the math on that. So just a little bit of whenever I couldn't sleep between 2 and 3 a.m., some of the things I've been working on with this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, might I provide a few comments before we move on? Sure. As liaison to the Land Acquisition Committee meeting, I attended the meeting where the vote was taken to move forward with this. It was a 14-to-1 vote. There were several committee members that had concerns, and those concerns focused primarily on the appraisals and the age of the appraisals and the lack of the new ones. So I think it is wise that we're waiting to move forward to the 20th with the new appraisals. But even with those concerns, those same members did vote in favor of proceeding with this project. So I think that there was very broad, strong support for the actual project. During that meeting also, Mr. Ralph Sexton presented some information, which I think is real important. We've kind of skirted it here today, but haven't really addressed it. But he stated that ranch provides enough beef to feed 3,000 people a year at the average daily rate of 60 pounds per person. And this is revenue coming into the county. You know, they're selling the product. Revenue is coming into the county. I believe Sean mentioned it takes a lot of people to run the ranch, and they're getting paid salaries, and that money is then respent in the community. So we haven't really touched on the economic benefit of this project, but I think continuing to have that ranch as a working ranch and selling that beef brings dollars into our community, which I think is a very good thing. And finally, Bob Adair read a proclamation that the Water and Soil Conservation Council had awarded to the Sextons for their outstanding stewardship of the property, their land management techniques, their best management practices, the fact they were retaining stormwater on site and treating it, and a lot of issues like that. So I just wanted to make sure that at this time that the recognition does go to the Sextons for being very good land stewards, and it gave me a great deal of confidence going forward, knowing that we have this pending agreement with the Sexton family, that they will continue to do the right thing by the land and for the community. So I just wanted to add those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other comments from anyone?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fletcher.
Commissioner Fletcher made a motion, seconded by Commissioner Davis, to continue the public hearing to the 20th of February and then modified it to allow public input, but I don't think we ever voted on the motion after the public input.
Oh, sorry about that. We didn't vote? I thought we did too.
I thought we did too, but
if legal says we did, it's not going to hurt.
I thought it was 5-0, but we could vote again. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is public hearing for approval of a resolution electing to use the uniform method for the levy collection enforcement of non-ad valorem assessments for the Westville Basso Street Lighting Municipality Service Benefit District, and that's found on pages 219 and 226.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bill DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office.
You might want to wait a minute, Bill.
Bill, it's nothing personal.
I know. The issue before you today is a public hearing on adoption of a resolution for establishment of a municipal services benefit unit, or an MSBU, for street lighting purposes in the West Wabasso area. What staff is asking Commission to do is perform the second step in a three-step process. Last week on consent, you approved an agreement between the county, the tax collector, and the property appraiser for payment of the costs associated with establishing an MSBU. The MSBU has been used many times in the past for establishment of districts that benefit, or to fund improvements that benefit the individual district. A couple examples would be most commonly for stormwater drainage, and in this case, for street lighting purposes. What we're asking the board to do today is open the public hearing, take any testimony on the matter, and then adopt a resolution that would accomplish two things. Number one, that the board intends to use the uniform method of collecting the non-ad valorem assessments found in Florida Statutes Chapter 197, and secondly, established by resolution that the West Wabasso Lighting MSBU is necessary for the neighborhood and will provide a benefit by improving the health, safety, and well-being of those residing and owning property in the neighborhood. The third step is a final public hearing on the matter that will come before you in February. If the board approves the resolution today, we will take that resolution along with a letter that informs each of the property owners in the MSBU what the improvements will be, how it will be benefited, how much it will cost them on an annual basis, and explain to them what the program entails. There will be a second public hearing on the ordinance, on adopting the ordinance, coming back before you in February. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions of staff? If not, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone in the audience like to be heard on this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Like sign. Motion carries 5-0. Kim, would you like to read the public notices?
Item 9C1A, continuation of notice of scheduled public hearings for January 23, 2007. Continuation of public hearings from December 5, 2006 meeting. Proposed amendments to LDR Chapter 910, Concurrency Management System, Title 10, Impact Fees, and Chapter 912, Single Family Development. This matter is legislative. 9C2A, notice of scheduled public hearings for February 6, 2007. Bureau 45 LLC. Request to rezone plus or minus 1.81 acres located at the southeast quadrant of intersection of US 1 and 45th Street and Heavy Commercial District to General Commercial District, Bureau 45 LLC owners, new urban group agent. That matter is quasi-judicial. 9C2B, Triple S Properties, Inc. Request to rezone plus or minus 9.63 acres located west of Indian River Boulevard and 550 feet south of the intersection of Indian River Boulevard and 41st Street from Medical District to Office Commercial Residential District. Triple S Properties owner, Bruce Barquette, agent. This matter is also quasi-judicial. 9C2C, Grand Harbor Northlands et al. Request to rezone plus or minus 435.88 acres located between 63rd Street and the North Relief Canal and east of U.S. Highway 1 from planned development to RS3 Single Family Residential District up to 3 units per acre, Multifamily Residential District up to 3 units per acre, and estuarine wetlands conservation up to 1 unit per 40 acres. And BEB Investment Limited request for a small-scale land use plan amendment to redesignate plus or minus 1.81 acres located south of 63rd Street and east of U.S. Highway 1 from low-density residential 1 up to 3 units per acre to commercial industrial, and to rezone those plus or minus 1.81 acres from PD to CG General Commercial, and to redesignate the plus or minus 1.81 acres located north of the North Relief Canal and east of U.S. Highway 1 from CI to L1 and rezone those 1.81 acres from PD to RM3, quasi-judicial. Also scheduled public hearings for February 6, 2007. GH Vero Beach Development LLC and Grand Harbor Northland LLC. Request for a proposed change to the Grand Harbor DRI development order to add the Riverbend PD site. This matter is quasi-judicial. Grand Harbor Northland LLC. Request for special exception use and conceptual PD plan approval for a development to be known as the Isles of Grand Harbor. Grand Harbor Northland LLC owner, Misteller and Muller Inc. agent. Located adjacent to the original Grand Harbor site and north of the North Relief Canal between U.S. Highway 1 and the Indian River Lagoon south of 63rd Street. This matter is quasi-judicial.
Thank you, Kim. Next item is under Departmental Manners Community Development, request for approval of a resolution endorsing By the River, Inc. as a sponsoring agency for an assisted living community under the Florida Communities Contribution Tax Credit Program found on pages 230 through 271.
Good morning, I'm Bob Keating, County Community Development Director. Recently the county got a request by the River, Inc. for the county to endorse By the River as an eligible sponsor under the Community Contribution Tax Credit Program. This is something that you've done a couple of times in the last couple of months, but when you've done it in the last couple of months, these were organizations that were located in the enterprise zone. And the Community Contribution Tax Credit Program is mostly oriented to an enterprise zone or a front porch area. The only difference is affordable housing projects can participate in the program regardless of where they're located. And By the River, Inc., which is associated with the Kashi Church Foundation, is proposing to develop a 41-unit affordable low-income assisted living facility, and that does qualify for participation in this program. And by participating in this program, corporate donors can get a credit on their corporate income tax, or they can get a sales tax refund for making donations to an eligible sponsor. And that's By the River's request today for the county to endorse them as an eligible sponsor under this program. Staff has looked at this, and actually we've been working with By the River for quite a while right now because we have approved funding for them through the county's affordable housing program, our hurricane housing recovery funds. So we're very familiar with this project, and staff supports the project. So there is a resolution here attached to your backup, and staff would recommend that you endorse By the River, Inc. As a sponsoring agency under the Community Contribution Tax Credit Program and adopt the resolution that's attached to the staff report. And I think we have a representative from By the River here.
Any questions of staff? Okay, would you like to comment on anything, or? Okay.
Move approval.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Next is Public Works. Thank you. Gifford Park Multipurpose Field Lighting System Contract Award, Musco Sports Lighting LLC, and that's found on 272 to 298.
Good morning, Jim Davis, Public Works Director. The county's received a FERDAP grant to light the multi-purpose field at Gifford Park. And after receiving the grant, we received a proposal from Musco Lighting, which is the premier sports lighting company probably in the southeast. And we can take advantage of a contract that the city of Jacksonville entered into in a competitive bids process for the sports lighting in the amount of $184,414. This is an excellent bid. We're taking advantage of the size of the Jacksonville area and the fact that they buy sports lighting on a large quantity basis. And we can piggyback their bid and save the 2 months or so of bidding process and awarding the bid and everything. and staffs recommend that we go that route. We have cleared that with the Department of Environmental Protection, FERDAP grant specialist, and they've approved this piggybacking. So to expedite the project and get the field lit as expeditiously as possible, we recommend that you approve the contract with Musco and authorize staff to proceed to put the lighting in. There's also a fee to Florida Power and Light to bring three-phase service to the lighting field, and that amount is $17,915. That will also provide electrical service to the security house that we just received bids on, and we'll be recommending next week an award to the contractor to build the security house at Gifford Park. So that'll provide electric to both facilities.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Utility services. Work order number 3 with Schulke, Biddle, and Stoddard LLC for construction of a 6-inch master plan force main from Old Dixie Highway to lateral G Canal, and revisions of the developer's agreement with High Point Subdivision for off-site utilities. UCP 2598, found on page 299 through 332.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries 5-0. We'll adjourn this meeting, and why don't we take a 10-minute break and come back for the special call meeting.
Your Indian River County Commission meeting is in a brief recess. Please stay tuned. The meeting will reconvene in just a moment.